This is David Murphy, president at Marshfield Medical Center Credit Union and host of the See You at the Top podcast. I'm here to empower the next generation of credit union leaders with insights and confidence. Join industry pioneers as they share their stories and leadership advice to fuel the dreams of future leaders. In today's episode, we hear from Jay Williamson, president and CEO of American Southwest Credit Union. Jay is a reformed banker who made the switch over to the credit union space several years ago. He has some great insights from his time running a bank and adapting to the credit union space as a CEO, and was the perfect first guest for the show. So without further ado, please enjoy my conversation with Jay Williamson. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the first ever episode of the See You at the Top podcast. I'm your host, David Murphy, president at Marshfield Medical Center Credit Union, located here in Marshfield, Wisconsin. And I am pleased to be joined by Jay Williamson, president and CEO of American Southwest Credit Union, as the inaugural guest of the podcast. There's a lot of pressure on Jay, I can tell. We had a discussion right before this about how serious this is. So just joking aside, of course, Jay, I appreciate you joining the podcast and being willing to share your story.
Oh, thanks for having me. It's an honor to be here. I'm happy to help anybody else. I didn't reach this position in life except by the help and grace of others. So if I can help somebody else, I'm happy to.
Yeah, we're in such a unique industry in which we want to actually collaborate with each other and we want to see each other succeed. So it's great to be able to get stories like this shared so that other potential leaders or those who question maybe their ability to lead or whatnot, that they can hear the inspiration that other leaders that have done it, and they can actually take inspiration from that to become leaders themselves. So again, I really much appreciate it.
Thanks for doing this. Like I said, this is all your initiative because you could see a need in our community and in our industry. I appreciate the fact that you're willing to step out there and do things like this. That says a lot about you, and I'm grateful. Thank you.
Well, thanks, Jay. I appreciate that. So let's start with your story. You're the president out there in an Arizona credit union. How did you get started, and how did you ascend into the role of CEO?
It's a very long story. I'll do my best to keep it brief. I actually started in community banking. Everybody talks about the banking side of it, the big fight between credit unions and banks. Having done both sides of it, the community bank is very much like the credit union. They're almost synonymous. There's not nearly as much animosity there. And quite frankly, we're all fighting the big three at this point in time. Community banks, credit unions, it's all of us against Wells Fargo, Chase, Bank of America. If we're being honest, that's the case. But I started on the commercial side, agricultural lending side, and the community banks, like I said, I was very deeply entrenched in that. I was a very small owner of a community bank that said, hey, we're locally owned. We will always be locally owned. And then lo and behold, they pulled us into a room one day and said, we're selling out. And then they didn't even take the best price. They did a save face. It was just 3 families, which really hurt my heart. They said one thing and did another. And I had some friends on the credit union side, and they said, hey, the credit union space really is about people and serving. And they said, we know you. We think you'll fit in there. And I do feel like this is where I fit. As far as trying to climb up the ladder, my dad was an entrepreneur. I knew early on that I really wanted to follow in his footsteps and lead. I felt like I'm never going to cure cancer. I'm never going to do anything special, but I can help lead an organization, and I know I can take care of the people that I'm there. I feel like if we can change families, we can change communities. We can change communities, we can change the world. And that's what I'm about. That's been my role, and it's just been something I've always wanted to do. So I've always worked towards that. That was just always the goal, and my expectations was I would, at some point in time, be given the opportunity to lead. And I've just been working towards that my entire career.
So you said you started in commercial banking, and so even though you had the entrepreneur spirit that was given to you pretty much from your father, when did you know you wanted to take on a leadership role within banking itself? You know, you started in the industry or in the banking sector, but then you started in the industry. How did you know, or at what point did you realize, okay, well, I don't want to branch out and do something different. I want to stay within banking and I want to work my way up the ladder, so to speak, there?
Yeah, that's a great question. I really don't even know the answer. I just started out. I always thought I'd be in agriculture. I grew up on a farm. That was one of my dad's businesses, was the farm, and that's where I grew up. I mean, that's all I ever did. That's all I ever really wanted to do. The college I graduated from had a job placement program, and I didn't even know it, but they made application for me to a financial service business. I got called in the interview, took it. I was working construction at that point in time. The years pile on. I mean, after 5 years, 7 years, and 10 years, I realized that I enjoyed what I was doing. I've told a lot of people that I feel like I'm an ordained banker, that this is just what fits for me. I know that everybody has to deal with money. It affects everybody's life. And this is people want somebody that cares about them as much as anything, and something that's very unique and all-encompassing as finances and money. And I just realized that I could help people in this particular case. I had a knack for money, how to deal it, how to lend it out, how to get it back, how to make it effective for people so that they were successful with the money that they borrowed, and allow that to transition from borrowing to investing and other wealth. And I just felt like I had a knack for it. So I had thought at one point in time I would be self-employed and do something on my own, but I just feel like this is where God called me to be. So this is where I am.
That's very funny. I was a very similar situation in the sense that I always wanted to own my own business, but I could never identify what exactly I wanted to do. And then I got into the credit union, and then someone saw the potential in me, and it's like, oh, okay, well, I can actually have the best of both worlds, because I don't have to come up with my own business plan, and I don't have to figure out what exactly I want to do. I can just take over an existing business and run this going forward. So it's interesting to hear your perspective on how similar our upbringing, so to speak, was when it comes to that standpoint.
Very much so. And that's the great thing about the credit union, especially, is it can be anybody. You don't have to be an owner. Your family doesn't have to own the bank for you to have an opportunity. That is the best thing about the credit union space, in my personal opinion, from a leadership aspect, from the opportunity standpoint.
Yeah, I agree with that. One of the misnomers I think that's out there when it comes to leadership, though, is that you have to be, quote unquote, ready to jump into leadership, right? In that you either have to have the experience or you have to take on different projects or whatnot. And so without stealing any thunder from your answer, I will just 2 seconds say that, even though I felt that I was prepared going into leadership, at the end of the day, I wasn't as prepared as I thought that I was. And so when you look back on your ascension into leadership positions, did you ever feel like you were fully ready for it? And if so, like, when did that feeling come across?
The very first time I felt like I was ready, and let me preface by saying you can feel completely ready and you're never ready. I mean, I'm not ready today, having done it for 7 years. That's just a misnomer. You have to be willing to start. But when I really felt like the very first, I applied for a bank CEO position. Never been in the C-suite, just been a branch manager. But I went into that particular interview very prepared and very ready. And that board of directors and group of owners grilled me with every question they could possibly grill me with for 2 hours nonstop. And I walked out of there and I was able to answer every one of their questions effectively. At that point in time, I walked out and told my wife, that's the best interview I've ever given. I, for the first time in my life, feel confident that I'm ready for this next level. I know there's a lot I don't know, but I know I'm ready and prepared. I prepared myself the best way possible. But even with that, and I didn't get that job, just full disclosure, even best interview ever, still didn't get the position. But I knew that I was ready to take that next step and that I could handle, even if I didn't know all the answers, I knew where to go to find the right answer. So I felt good about that. And then even going into this, like I say, I'm 7 years down the road. I've been through a pandemic and everything else. You're never ready because you're going to get thrown curveballs all the time. Last year at this time, we were all looking at a liquidity crunch and these huge banks closing, but none of them were prepared for you. You just have to work your way through those situations. So if this is something you want to do, just take your shot, prepare yourself as best as you can, realize that you're never going to be ready for it and that you're completely ready for it today and right now, and you might as well jump in and go. That's where I stand. How about you?
I agree with you, just wholeheartedly based on what you had said there. Like I said, I was groomed, I would say probably starting in 2017 or so, to ultimately be a successor to my former boss, who was the CEO here. And so I had 4 or 5 years where I was attending different meetings and networking and growing that side of things. And I was really heavily invested in the leadership development side of things. I knew how important it was, and I wanted to make sure that I was a competent leader first and foremost. So I'll be honest with you. When I took over so it'll be 3 years, May 1st, actually. And so when I took over, I know this sounds like I have a big ego, and I promise that I do not. But I thought, okay, well, I'm ready to go with this. I understand what needed to be done. Yes, we had just gone through the pandemic. We were coming out of it. I mean, obviously, there was still long ways to go, but it wasn't the heart of the pandemic. But it was just, okay, well, we have all these things that are thrown at us, and I'm ready to tackle these. I know what I want to do. And I think for the first 6 to 12 months, I think I was able to accomplish that. It's like, okay, well, I knew what was on the radar. Let's take care of those things. We're good to go. And then you get past about 12 months and you're like, okay, well, what's next? And then you got to dig deeper. You got to go back to the drawing board, so to speak. And you have to say, okay, well, I knew what I was going to do to get here. Now, a little bit, what do I need to do to stay here? And what do I need to do to continue to prove myself? And so it was a challenge, I will say, because I didn't see it coming. I'll be wholehearted and honest about that I did not see the challenges that quickly. I thought, okay, well, I knew that there was going to be challenges. You don't become a CEO of an organization without any challenges. So I wasn't that naive, but I didn't think that I would experience it that quickly. So, but looking back on the whole situation, knowing what I know today, I still wouldn't have changed a thing as far as taking the leap to get into the C-suite and taking over an organization and continuing it into the future. Because I think it could be easy to say, oh man, I wouldn't do that again if I'd given the chance. But I don't look at it from that perspective, because I think anytime you're faced with animosity, it gives you an opportunity to grow, not only as an individual, but as a professional. And not everything's going to run smoothly in life, and you have to be able to be willing to adapt, and you have to be willing to pivot and whatnot. So I think it really forces you to adopt that mentality, and I think it's for the better in the long run.
No, I agree. And I think it's cool that you got mentored. I never really had that. I had tried to seek it out, and I asked a lot of questions because I knew where my weaknesses were, but I never had the chance to be really mentored and know that I was the next in command, and something that I was going to take over. It was always a struggle to find out where my next position was going to be. I told several bosses that I had that I eventually wanted their position. They just look at me and kind of snarl and go on down the record. They didn't see a whole lot in me, and fair enough to their, I wasn't at a place that I was ready at that point in time, so I understand why they didn't see anything in me. But it would have been nice to have been in your position and know that I was coming up and had somebody that was investing in me. I got invested in after I got the position. There was a group of CEOs in Spokane that met every month. Several of them were close to retirement, and they were just willing to take me under their wing and teach me a ton. Charlotte Nimitz, one of them. She's at Canopy Credit Union in Spokane, Washington, and I still call her today and say, okay, Charlotte, I'm stuck. What do I do? He's very...
Yeah, you have to have that network of people, just for your sanity as a leader, whether you are in the president role, your C-suite, or even if you're a little bit further down the chain. You have to have those people that you can turn to outside of the organization just to bounce ideas off, because I'm sure you've done it, Jay. I've sat in my office and I've drove myself crazy trying to work through a problem or work through an idea, when it's like, well, just pick up the phone and call ABC or, whoever, whatever credit union, because they're going to be able to bounce ideas off of you, and it just goes a long way. But it's difficult to hear, especially a lot of the newer CEOs, they come through and they don't have that network that's built up. And, to your point, if you weren't exposed to that before you got put into that role, or before you actually were given that role, it can make it a lot more difficult to understand, okay, well, where can I turn, at times of need? Because there are going to be times of need, whether it is this pandemic or the liquidity crunch, as you mentioned. And a lot of these things, if you've never gone through it before, and even if you have, I think that's one of the amazing things that I discovered, was that I thought, okay, well, I've never been through, the interest rate cycles that we saw over the last 12 to 15 months, and the liquidity crunch. We've never really had an issue with that. But truth be told, talking to a lot of seasoned C-suite individuals, they're like, well, it was never the same as the one that we're going through now anyway. So they're learning just as alongside of you. But it's nice to be able to say, okay, well, tell me what you're thinking and tell me some of the ideas that you have. And then, okay, well, that at least gives me a starting spot.
It does. And you're exactly right. I mean, that's just it. That's why I say you're never really prepared, because none of us have ever went through some of these things. And there's a new something on my plate every day that none of us have ever experienced before. We're all walking through it. So don't wait until you have that experience, because most of what you're going to be thrown, nobody's ever seen before. It's just a new evolving world.
Absolutely. And I think it's going to continue for sure.
And not slowing down and speeding up.
Right. So take yourself back to when you applied for the job at the credit union. And once you were notified that you got the interview and that you were getting prepared for that, how did you actually prepare yourself for the role, whether it was going into the interview or once you actually got the notification that you were selected for the position? How did you prepare yourself? I know you alluded to it a little bit, but if you want to maybe elaborate a little bit more on that process.
I'll tell you exactly what I did, and I think it was the best thing that I've ever done. And I don't even know how I came up with the idea, but going into that interview, I wanted to set myself apart. I knew what my strengths were. I knew what my weaknesses were. So I put together a 120-day plan laid out by month of exactly what, if I was awarded the position, that I was going to do. And I kind of went through that plan, asked them if they had any questions. And I said, hey, here's the deal. This is something you can hold me accountable to, because this is exactly what I planned. And it wasn't that the things that I had on there were necessarily right, but it got me to asking the right questions and got me going down the right road. I did that when at the very first place that I was at CEO. I did it here, basically the same plans. And after about 45 days, I was on an entirely different path in both places. But that plan and having something in place allowed me to check. And if I would get stuck, I could just go back to my plan and say, all right, what's next? What do I need to do today? I think that allowed me to walk in feeling confident about my position, even though I wasn't entirely ready, but I had a plan of what I was going to do from day one, and I could just start executing that plan. Every time I got stuck, I could go back to it and just pick up the next task. So that, to me, was the best thing I did, and what I would absolutely recommend to anybody that's applying for the CEO type position, to show them that you have taken some time to invest in it. I did have a couple of board members come back and say, nobody else did that. Never seen that in an interview, that somebody had a 90-day plan that they could hand to us, that we could talk about. They were new hiring a CEO. That was the first person I took over, had been there for 40 years. So none of them had ever hired a CEO before. You're going to find that, especially in some of the smaller credit unions, that the leadership has been there a long time. The board doesn't necessarily know what to do. So the way you can show your value as a candidate and as an eventual leader is to walk in with a plan to show them that, A, you've done your homework, B, that you know where you're going, and that you can actually help them through this process of, hey, even if you don't hire me, this is some things to look for in other candidates. And I was very candid about that. I'm putting this together as much for you as for me, so that we can all be on the same track, and no matter what happens here, we're both better going forward. And it's been successful for me. That's the best tip I can hand out to anybody.
Yeah, that's great advice. And so I will say where our stories divulge a little bit or split off is that I was an internal candidate when I got the promotion essentially into the CEO spot, whereas you were an outside candidate, it sounds like. And so whereas I had some familiarity with the board, I had been attending board meetings since I started here at the credit union essentially. So I had some rapport already built with the board members, so it wasn't as foreign to them on both sides. Whereas coming from an outsider perspective, you not only have to apply for the position, but you're also trying to impress the board members, right? It's sometimes you don't like to think that it comes down to those types of semantics, but it does. You want to make sure that you come across as confident and that you come across as competent and that they understand, you only get 2 hours. It's kind of like a first date, unfortunately, where it's like you got 2 hours to showcase your skills, and you really want to make sure that you're not just flying by the seat of your pants, so to speak. So I think it's great advice not only for C-suite individuals, but I think anywhere up and down the management ladder, because obviously leadership is important, but I also think that when you retain or you obtain that title of manager somewhere within the entire title, that it means that you care more than just your impact, that it's either the people that you manage or your role within the organization, how you can further the organization. So having some type of a plan like that, I think, is really beneficial to showcase that it's not just, okay, well, this is great for me because I'm going to get more money and I'm going to have more responsibility. And obviously we like those things too, but it also demonstrates that, okay, well, you understand your role within the organization as whole. Because even as CEOs, it's easy to think, well, we don't have bosses. Well, no, we have multiple bosses, i.e. the board of directors. So we have to be able to appease those bosses as well and showcase that, yes, we are right for the position.
I couldn't agree more. Like I said, you're exactly right.
So I know you mentioned a couple CEOs that you had reached out to once you got the position. Was there anyone else that you turned to for help, whether it was within the industry, or was it maybe, I know you had mentioned your father being an entrepreneur. Was there someone that you really turned to and said, okay, in times of crisis, so to speak, or whatnot, that you really relied on as you worked through the role and became more comfortable with it?
Yeah, there's lots. I've had lots of friends and some not even in the same industry. That sometimes is the best. You can just go out to them. They'll look at it from an entirely different perspective. So what may seem like a total roadblock to me seems really easy to them. It's just about your networking. I mean, that was probably one of the best things. I went to the Graduate School of Banking, getting to being a part of a class of 70 of people that were similar, like-minded, had aspirations of were either in a C-suite position or wanted to be there. That's been great. I called on lots of my former classmates there. But just anytime you get a chance to network, I mean, that's, to me, probably was the better part. I've done a lot of education things in my life, but the education wasn't nearly as what prepared me as well as the networking and the people around me, because you can ask them of your textbooks, you'll get a case study or whatever and learn from that case study. But when the case study is your own problem, and you could talk about it with somebody else and walk through that, it's an entirely different scenario. So I just think your friends and the people that you know, that you come across, maybe even if you don't know them. I mean, like I said, there's a lot of people that helped me be successful in my roles of whatever level that is. And now I'm at that point, if I can give back, I will. So if you're out there and you tune into this, even though we don't know each other, connect with me on LinkedIn and I will answer any questions that you have, just because people have been willing to do that for me. So take advantage of opportunities out there from other people. I think that's the second best piece of advice that I can give.
Yeah, I know we touched on it at the beginning of the episode here, but just the collaborative nature that credit unions display. I think we're in a unique circumstance in that we have, whether we know the individual or not. I mean, Jay, you and I have never met before this conversation. We had a few email exchanges, but really we've never met in person or really had a long, in-depth conversation. But just the fact that I could reach out and say, hey, listen, this is something that I'm doing, and you agreed to do that, in a lot of other industries. And I get like for either people who are former bankers or who currently work in the banking sector, and it's like, no, we don't go there. We don't collaborate in that level. I suppose, what's that?
Definitely not as much. There was a little bit in there, but it's nothing like the CU industry. That's my favorite part of the CU industry.
Yeah,
that is the one biggest string, banks and credit. We do collaborate well and willingly.
Yeah, so take advantage of that, absolutely, and don't wait till you get into those manager positions. I would say I was fortunate enough to be a part of our Young Professionals Network when I was 12 years ago. I think is when I got started in that, and I've been able to grow my network first and foremost, but more importantly, I've gained a lot of friends, colleagues who are working at other credit unions in the state here and elsewhere, and we bounce ideas off each other all the time, and it's paramount for us to be able to continue the trajectory forward as potential leaders within the industry, for sure.
Couldn't agree more.
So I know that you mentioned the second best piece of advice, and I apologize if you already mentioned the first one, but what one piece of advice did change your career at the end of the day?
I don't know. There's one piece of advice to me. That everybody, just for transparency, he sent me out the questions, and I thought a lot about this one. It really wasn't so much the one piece of advice. To me, what's driven me was the people that told me I couldn't do it. I said earlier that CEOs that I wanted their position and they would scoff at me. And that's what drove me, was people telling me that I couldn't do it. I don't know if that's what that says about my character, that I don't remember all great things that people told me, because I know that happened. But to me, it was people saying, hey, you can't do this. You don't have that capability. Yeah, I can do it. I know in my heart that this is something that I want, and I may not be ready for it at this point in time, but I can learn and I can change. And that's what I think people didn't see in me at that point in time, was they thought and that I would never change. And I think that's the expectation a lot of people don't understand. Who you are today is not who you were last year and who you're going to be next year. You're going to grow. You have capacity to learn new things and better yourself, learn from situations, to get education, to collaborate with others. You're going to grow, and that will prepare you and help you along the way. So I think if you take nothing else away, realize that you're not who you are today is because of who you used to be, and it's going to change in the future. So don't limit yourself or what others think about you. What those people thought about me was not true and not right, but it didn't limit me either, because I knew that what I wanted to accomplish, and then I was willing to go and do whatever it took to accomplish those things. If you feel that same way, you can do this. You can do it and do it well. Don't listen to the negative sayers of the other side, except that's your motivation like it was for me. Take that, whatever motivates you, whether it's positive or negative, take what you need to grow and be willing to go on and try something new and learn something new and be great.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love that as advice. And I couldn't help but picture Jordan in the Last Dance documentary when you're saying about identifying all the CEOs that told you couldn't do it, and I could just picture you saying like, "Yeah, that has really sit well with me."
Didn't, but that's okay. It started in 7th grade till even not too terribly long ago, but I can remember all of those, and that's been my fuel and drive. That's part of it. That's not all of it, but those are the ones, still the things that stick in my craw for years and years.
I get you, man. I get you. So you touched on it a little bit there, but I'll ask you to elaborate a little bit on it. What are some of the challenges that you faced? Obviously, not having the faith of leaders to see what the potential was in you is one that you've clearly identified. But were there other challenges, whether it is something specific to the credit union space or just other personal challenges that you faced as you traveled along this journey into leadership?
Yes, and this will be, I think, go across all lines. Know what you're good at. So I came up on the lending side, and I made my point to know anything about lending inside and out, whether that was consumer loans, mortgage loans, secondary loans, agricultural loans, commercial loans. I took my time and understood and was an expert in all of those. But I also looked at the industry and knew that there was things that I didn't know a lot about. I didn't know about investing, or you become in the C-suite in a CEO role, CFO role. You have to understand balance sheet management and those type of things. I knew that I understood one half of the balance sheet, but I didn't understand the other. So I asked everybody that I could what their philosophies, how did they do it? Why did they make the decisions that they did? So that when I got into those, so I kind of had a philosophy of what I was going to do after I listened to 10 or 15 people and what their answers were for the instance balance sheet side of it. One thing that stuck out to me from one individual, they said, you take all your risk on the lending side. That's where the majority of our risk on our balance sheet is. So don't take a lot of undue risk on your investment side. Use that more for your cash and liquidity so that you don't get into the trouble that we saw the banks have last year at this point in time. And I married that with know exactly what you're doing. If you're just starting off in your investing side of it and you don't understand some of the more complex investments out there, stick with what you know. You already know CDs just from being in the industry. You can start there and you can learn and grow. Once again, you're going to get better at what you do. You're going to experience new things and learn and grow. So those are the type of things that you want to do. Find an area that you're an expert in. Take advantage of the places that you're not, but have some idea. Prepare yourself along those ways to be ready for these type of positions. That's a lot of it, and be willing to take on new things and grow. I didn't know a lot about the HR. I didn't realize how much I was going to need about HR. So I went back to school and got a master's degree and a lot of time in the HR side of it, because that was just nothing I ever had experience with or had truly been exposed to, but realized it was a weakness once I got here. So there's just lots of avenues out there to take. Know what you're great at, know what your weaknesses are, and always be trying to improve on both sides.
Yeah, personal growth is huge for me, whether it is professional development here within their roles at the credit union or just growing as individuals outside of the credit union. And so to hear that as a challenge, but something that you've learned to overcome and how to how to build off of some of those challenges, I think is great advice. I mean, I love hearing that you stepped up to the challenge and understood, okay, well, I've identified that there's an area of deficiency, but here's how I'm going to actually fill that area and make sure that I have, increase my competence in this so that I can be a contributing person within the organization to be able to have some good guidance as opposed to just being a liability on that side.
Yeah. And then, once you get into especially the CEO fund side of it, hire for your weaknesses. I could not do the CFO's job in any way, shape, form, or fashion. I have to have somebody that's good at that. But we make a good partner. I'm not good at details. I'm really good at vision. I'm not good at details. So I make sure that I have somebody on my team that is good at those things. And I communicate to it. This is not my strength. I need you for this. And I'll take over one side, but together we'll make a great team. We're not stepping on each other's toes, and we're both valued for those reasons. I think that's another thing. You have to know what your weaknesses are because you need to get other people on your team to strengthen those weaknesses. You don't have to do it all. You're not going to do everything well. Figure out what you do well.
Yeah, and I think it speaks to your humility as a leader because it's easy to, especially as a newer leader, it's easy to come in and say, okay, well, I have to be the expert on everything, and I don't want to hire people who are smarter than me because I don't want to look like the idiot in the room, so to speak. But at the end of the day, you're driving the bus, but you need great mechanics and you need people who can take care of things and you need people who can give you the directions and whatnot. So it's super important to be able to say, okay, well, yes, it sounds like it's going to hurt my pride to be able to hire the CFO who's way better at CFO responsibilities than I am, but at the end of the day, it's going to propel our organization forward as opposed to hanging on and say, well, no, I can do it. I mean, I know I can do it, and then run into challenges from that perspective.
There's the one thing I'd probably differ on. I love being the dumbest person on the bus because it means I just get to sit at the back of the bus and say yes to all their great ideas. But my team makes me look way smarter than I am, and I'm totally fine being dumb. Doesn't bother me in the least.
Hey, I agree with that. So if you ran into personal challenges, some of the challenges you highlighted were maybe industry knowledge or whatnot, but if you ran into personal challenges, from where did you seek inspiration or confidence during those times?
It just depends on which particular one. It's been my wife at times. It's been best friends at times. It's been my kids at times. It's been coworkers. It really depends on the situation. Because once again, you fill in the need. You find somebody that's great at what you're weak at. If I'm struggling with something, I'm not going to go to somebody that struggles with the same thing I do. I'm going to go to somebody that is an expert at what I'm struggling in and get their advice. So it's just the willingness to find people that are smarter than you, that know things. And then you have to be smart, just have different experiences and different strengths and learn from them. That's the best answer to that question.
That's great. Yeah, I appreciate that insight. So as a reform banker, and I will say that there are a lot of reform bankers in the credit union space, so you're not alone in that sense. But what ultimately did draw you into the movement when you applied for the CEO role there, and what kept you here?
It really has been about the greater good. Like I said, the last bank that I was at before I made this transition, being a small owner, there was 3 families there that owned the majority of those shares, and it spun a good story. But in the end, they only cared about themselves and their liquidity matters and doing what was best for them. In the credit union side, that has not been the case. We do the best things for our members. I can't tell you on the banking side how many times I've sat and had a board member where a senior exec say, no, I know that person. We can charge them an extra half point or another 1% and they'll take it. We did what was best for the bank. And that's not a knock on anybody. A lot of those people had invested thousands of dollars. It was a for-profit business. They're there to make a profit. But being on the credit union side, that's not always the case for us. It's about doing what's right for our members a lot of the time. We have to make a profit. We have to worry about our net worth ratios. There's not a lot of difference day-to-day side between the bank and the credit union. It's the extra side. So 2 years ago, we made a conversion on our digital banking, and we knew that was only one step, but that was going to cost us $17,000 for a 1-year fix, and then we were going to scrap it all and start over. In the banking side of it, I would have just ran for that next 12 months and saved that $17,000. But both me and myself, my executive team, and the board said, hey, this is the credit union's member. It's going to make their life better for a year. $17,000 is not a tremendous amount when you spread it over 36,000 members for 12 months. Let's do what's right for our membership and do what's right there. Getting to make those type of decisions, to me, the most critical thing that speaks to my heart of being able to serve others. Like I say, to me, I'm an ordained banker, and this side of it is that we get to take care of our people and our communities the way we want to be treated. We get to do what's right for them. As long as we can make enough money, have enough capital, we can splurge on making people's lives better. We can splurge on giving back to our. That's not the case in every business out there by any stretch of the imagination. And that's what keeps me here, is because we get to do the right things for the right reason. That's what I tell my staff all the time is, let's do the right things for the right reasons every day and we'll be successful.
Yeah, that's a great summary as to what the credit union movement stands for at the end of the day, because we are more than just an organization that cares about making money. At the end of the day, it is about serving our communities, it's about serving our members. So you put it very eloquently, and I appreciate that insight on there. With this podcast, it really is geared more for those who are up and coming leaders, whether you are just starting out on your leadership journey, or you maybe have gotten your first role, but you're unsure how to continue to grow as a leader. So I'm going to have you leave on this question, Jay. What one piece of advice would you share with someone just starting out on this journey?
Go for it now. I knew from a very early age that I wanted to be a CEO, and I kept thinking that I had to take certain steps and do certain things. And in looking back on it, I could have taken my shot a lot sooner and was probably ready. So don't wait. Do what you think is right. Follow your heart in what the things that you want. Take on new responsibilities, new challenges, whatever they look like. Don't let life pass you by and regret and spend time in regret, thinking, oh, I didn't take that opportunity, or I didn't get that chance. I can tell you all the things, the opportunities that I've taken. I've moved like 7 different times. It's not the opportunities that I took that I regret. It's the shots that I didn't take that I regret. And that's my advice is go for it. Follow your heart. Do what you want. Your life is going to be very, very short in the big scheme of things. Our time here is just vapor and a mist in the wind. Take your shot. Go have fun. Do what you want to do. Do what you're challenged to do. Take on those opportunities and try to live your best life. Don't stay in a bubble or safety. Have some fun. Take your challenges.
Yeah, I love that, Jay. I couldn't agree more with you. And I'm glad that that's how we ended this conversation, was on an optimistic note like that. So I appreciate you joining for the first episode here. I hope that what's that?
I said, thanks for the opportunity. I'm so honored. And here's the best thing, David.
It can go nowhere but up from here. You got the worst one out of the way. All the rest are going to be so much better.
There's a lot of pressure on the next person, I think, is what I'm going to tell them when I get that set up here.
No, they've got no pressure whatsoever. Oh, did you listen to that first episode we did? It's going to be so much easier for you.
Oh, that's great. Well, I appreciate the time. As always, I appreciate your insights and your story, and glad that you came to the credit union side, and, wish you nothing but success in the future here, Jay.
Likewise. Let me know how I can help.
Sounds great. Thank you.
You bet. Have a great day.
Thank you for tuning into this episode of the See You at the Top podcast. By listening, you've shown a commitment to your growth as a leader in our industry, and for that, I applaud you. Reach out to our speakers for further insight on topics covered today. Please share and like the podcast to extend our reach to aspiring leaders. Stay tuned for our next episode, where we'll continue to delve into leadership stories and tips from industry experts. Thanks again for listening.